Parade, starring Frank Sinatra.
Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men?
And now, Smile a While with Lorenzo Jones and his wife, Belle.
Here's the Manhattan merry-go-round that brings you the bright side of life, that whirls you in music to all the big night spots of New York town, to hear the top songs of the week sung so clearly you can understand every word and sing them yourself.
This is the golden age of radio. I'm Dick Bertel, and tonight we'll take you on another audio excursion back to radio's formative years. You'll hear the programs that made the era golden, and meet people who made those broadcasts a reality.
The Golden Age of Radio is brought to you by Burritt Mutual Savings Bank, serving Central Connecticut since 1889, and by WTIC. You'll meet producer-announcer Roger Bauer after these words from the Burritt.
Here's a message of importance to everyone who's interested in saving money from the Big B, Burritt Mutual Savings Bank, the money place. Right now, for a limited time, Burritt Mutual can offer the highest rates on savings accounts, up to 8.03% effective annual yield on a 7 5/8% 5-year certificate. Interest remains on deposit to earn the top yield, and there's a $10,000 minimum required. At maturity, that $10,000 will have grown to $14,718.46. That's the top savings account. It's the highest rate, and it's at Burritt Mutual, the Big B, in New Britain, West Hartford, Wethersfield and Rocky Hill, Glastonbury, and now in Newington. 8.03% effective yield on 5-year savings certificates at Burritt Mutual Savings, the money place. Member FDIC.
And now the host of the Golden Age of Radio, Dick Bertel.
Good evening, and with me once again is radio collector historian Ed Corcoran.
Hi, Dick. How are you this evening?
Well, I'm just fine, and I'm anxious to meet our guest.
Dick, I thought we'd turn things around. You could do the introductions tonight.
And I'm pleased to do the introduction because our guest tonight is an announcer, and I'm always delighted to meet and interview an announcer. But more than that, he was a well-known radio producer, director during the golden age of radio, voted 2 years in a row as the best announcer in radio. Our guest tonight, Roger Bauer. Roger, it's good to have you here on the program.
Well, it's nice to be here on the program. It's nice to even see Hartford, for that matter. I've never been here before.
It's about time we had you on the program, too, because you make your home in Connecticut.
Oh, yes. Yes, we live in a lovely place called Lakeville, Connecticut.
Beautiful.
It is beautiful, that's right. How did you know?
Well, I've been over there, as a matter of fact. I had the opportunity to interview Artie Shaw at his home.
Artie Shaw. Now, he's a musician, isn't he?
I think you've probably heard of him, yeah.
I forget what he played now.
Clarinet.
I thought it was Benny Goodman.
You may get from Roger's tone that he can tell a good joke. And a little later on in the program, you'll hear one of the best shows on radio for telling jokes. I may as well mention it now, Ed. Can you top this? Because, Roger, this was your baby, wasn't it?
It was. Well, I must also admit that Senator Ford, whose idea originally was he was the catalyst, shall we call it? Does that mean anything, catalyst?
Yeah, I think so.
I picked it up last week in one of those articles in the New York Times Magazine.
We'll talk about that more later. I want to talk about Roger Bauer's beginning in radio. We have to go back to the year 1927 for that. Here was an actor who more or less walked into a job in radio. How did that happen, Roger?
Well, I had a friend of mine who was told me to meet him. We were looking forward to a long, dry summer, to meet him at WMCA. And I said, what is WMCA? And he said, it's a radio station. It's on the top of the McAlpin Hotel. So I went down there, and he wasn't there. And apparently they were giving auditions, which I presume he was there to do. So they handed me the New York Times, which is the toughest thing to read from the beginning. And I read it, and next thing you know, I'm hired. And I thought, this is wonderful, a nice summer job. And here I am still in it.
Yes, little did you know that it was going to lead to a very long and wonderful career. Of course, these were the days, Ed, when all programming was live. You didn't play records on the radio. And, Roger, you did a number of band remotes in those early days.
Yes, one of the things that helped me a great deal, I feel, at WMCA, because the other two gentlemen didn't want to get off their duffs. I think that's a polite word I can use on radio, to go out. So we lined up about 6 or 7 nightclubs. And we'd start, we'll say, at the Paradise Club, and across the street would be Jimmy Durante and another club. And as the Paradise Club would start playing their closing theme, I'd run across the street, give the signal, pick it up, and say, so we leave the delightful Paradise Club, and then here we go, and a couple of honks, thinking, here I am now in this other club, and their theme had started. And NBC finally sent somebody over to see how we did this. And it was that simple.
There'd be an engineer standing by at each one of these points?
These guys today, if they had a carry remote thing like that, it was about, I'd say 4 feet long, a foot and a half wide, and about 3 feet. And it took 2 men. If you went out with them, you had to help them carry because they couldn't. Maybe your engineer could. He looks like a pretty good-sized boy, but the rest of them couldn't. And that was the way it went.
Well, the next big junction in your career was when you joined WOR, the great station in New Jersey. How did that come about, Roger?
I've been over in New Jersey working for this guy, and I better observe the rules of libel here. He was just terrible. I used to throw him out of his own station because he was awful. And I wanted to get out of there, and I started to come back to New York, and I met a fellow named Leonard E. L. Cox, one of the nicest guys I've ever known, a screwball, a wild man, but very brilliant. And he called me up one day to come over and take an audition. So I came over and took the audition and got on the staff and was promptly fired about 6 times in the next 3 months.
For what reasons?
Because I had come from if you'd pardon the expression, the theater. And we had discipline there. You're supposed to do things a certain way. And all these old gals were banging the floors and kicking microphones around and all that sort of stuff. And I would correct them. And they were all people who charged things at Bamberger's. And they raised the devil with Mr. Louis Bamberger.
Until one day you were called to Bamberger's, and you thought this was the real
Mr.
finish.
Louis Bamberger himself called me, and I thought, well, this is it now. I've done it once too often. And I got over there 8 o'clock in the morning. You know what time 8 o'clock in the morning? Well, you do, don't you, Dick?
Yeah,
but
I sure do.
For me, it was terrible, but particularly as I lived in New York, or Bronx, as a matter of fact, that time, up in Fordham section. So I came all the way down, got on the Penn Central, or Pennsylvania Railroad, as they call it then, got over there, and this wonderful, sweet, grand little old man welcomed me at the door himself in person, took me to breakfast, and introduced me to all the buyers in the store so I could get a discount, and I was in. He was wonderful. He was such a modest little man. He used to come to some of the programs later when I was producing and directing and ask, would it be all right if he could sit in there and watch it? He only owned the joint.
Roger, you said that during those early days at OR, back in the late 20s, you discovered you invented Rudy Valley. What do you mean by that?
Well, I didn't. I would say the station did.
Yes, that's
we
what
had
I
a
meant.
line into a club, and Rudy was playing then. He had a small little band. It wasn't the great, whatever the name it later became.
Connecticut Yankees.
Connecticut Yankees. These didn't look like Yankees. If they were, they didn't come from Connecticut. Believe me. And he had this little band up in down somebody's Hi-Ho Club in 57th Street, and I swear there were about 8 or 9 or 10 pieces. I swear they all played melody, and it was sweet and soft and nice. And everybody else band in those days, that's from the nightclubs, the other clubs I'm telling you about before that, were big, good bands, but they were loud. So and Rudy used to sing, "My time is your time," and that kind of stuff. So I thought he was great, and I put in a good word for him. But nothing happened until I was going up to Van Cortlandt Park to go ice skating, and the trolley car was full of all these little girls singing, "Did you hear Rudy last night? Wasn't he wonderful?" I thought, we got something. So we began to do more for him, but they didn't take it up too well till, I think it was J. Walter Thompson, a fellow named Bob Simon, a very good friend of mine. He brought him in and made him in the Fleischman Hour, and then they gave him the Rudy Valley program, which he didn't want, by the way. They said, "You're going to put all these guests in." And Rudy said, "Oh, no, you're not." So they finally put it to him. Either it's going to be that or a new band. So it was the best thing ever happened to him.
Sure, because he was the originator in the very real sense of the variety show on radio.
Well,
Yeah,
that was
that's right.
there was the guy who was a vice president in charge of I don't know whatever it was. He did it well. He brought on Bobby Burns, Charlie McCarthy, and Lou Bergen. He used that as the vehicle to try. He practically programmed NBC. This man, and Valley used to complain he wanted to talk with these birds, and they wouldn't ever let him.
Which might have been good, I don't know. But at any rate...
I might add that we used to have to turn in reports from the remotes of what we thought of the music and everything, and I said, "This guy sings great, he plays, don't let him talk." So you know what happened to me.
Well, at any rate, these were the days before the mutual broadcasting system came into being. That was in 1934 or thereabouts. And
we had a great network then called the Radio Quality Group. That was WOR, KLW in Cincinnati, WMAQ in Chicago, and another station in St. Louis, which covered just about the population.
And did WOR originate most of the programs for the Quality Group?
We did them all, practically.
Did you?
As a matter of fact, the WOR originated the first starting of the Columbia CBS. They bought 9 hours a week from us.
You were on staff at this time at OR?
Yes.
What was the staff job like in those days?
Well, I enjoyed it. I was a peculiar kind of a person. I could do anything. And I could also, within reason, and they left it up to me, could work on other networks. And it was great because if you could work the time, I could go over and direct and produce these things. And in one or two instances, the late Norman Brokenshire, I guess everybody knows that he had a drinking problem for a while, and he was on CBS, and till Broke got an AA, I was engaged at $150 a week to stand by in case Broke couldn't make it that night. It just meant I had to sit around at 7 o'clock till I got the call, so I'd go home and get my check the next morning.
But, Roger, I learned that not only were you an accomplished announcer, a director, a producer, but you were a sound effects man as well. You played a major role in a program called The Witch's Tale.
That's right. I think I'd like to, in these days when the Army's so free, move that up to colonel role, if you don't mind. I was the original cat. If you recall, Adelaide Fitzgerald was the witch, and she used to say, 105 years old, she'd say, Satan, meow, and I'd answer in all different kinds of voices. And also, sound effects had not become a science. So I had sound effects all over the place. I also announced that one, too.
Did you?
I had just a short thing. It was very simple, but we had all these sound effects. And
these were manual sound effects that you'd have to create
what
at
else?
the time. Sure.
And matter of fact, some little girl from some high school paper called up, all starry-eyed, and she came over to interview me and asked about sound effects. She finally said, Mr. Bauer, how do you make the falling of snow? I said, you drop feathers on a drum.
Good line. Now, when did The Witch's Tale go on the air? What time of night?
It went on either 10 or 10:30. I have forgotten.
It was late.
It was late, yes, because it was one of those shows so well written, and even though it was fantastic, you could almost believe that it could happen to you.
This is Alonzo Dean Cole
Yes.
who created the program, and I suppose wrote most of the scripts.
Yes, he was an old vaudevillian.
Roger, you said that had he stayed with it or had luck held out, he would have surpassed the creator of Lights Out, Arch Oboler.
Well, he did it long before Arch Oboler did it. He was, in other words, I would say he really before his time.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing I'm saying is to detract from Mr. Oboler's expertise.
No.
He was very good, and his Lights Out were great. But this was the first one of its kind, a real thriller and horror show.
We bring you The Witch's Tale, written and produced by Alonzo Dean Cole. And now let us make our way to ancient Salem, where old Nancy and Satan, her black cat, reside.
Hannah, I'm 51-year-old I be today. Yes, sir. Hannah, I'm 51-year-old. Well, Satan, here all these folks be gathered to hear another pretty little bedtime stories. And tonight, we're gonna tell them one that's become famous all over the world. What's that, Satan? Yep, Satan, you're right. A woman named Mary Shelley once writ this yarn of ours in a book, but no one ever knowed the real true facts of the case but me. Douse out them lights. That's right. Nice and dark and careful now. Sitting in the spooky shadows is the way to hear our purty tales. Now draw up to the fire and gaze into them embers. Gaze into 'em deep, and soon you'll be with us in Switzerland. Soon you'll hear our yarn of Frankenstein. Frankenstein! I hear you. Don't break the door now. Who is it?
I'm Madame Maurice. Oh. Professor Waldman.
Just wait a minute.
Oh, good evening, Madame Maurice.
Good evening. Raining cats and dogs. Step inside so I can get this door closed.
Yes,
And give me that wet umbrella before you drip it all over my clean floor. Oh, you men of science.
Now, Victor, you are delirious with excitement. What have you discovered?
Wait until she's out of hearing. She wouldn't understand.
Well, she's gone. Now, what is this mystery of yours?
Come into the laboratory. You shall see. Professor Waldman, from the putrescence of death, I have discovered the secret of life.
Life?
Yes. I, Victor Frankenstein, have created man. See? You see what I have done? Bit by bit, I have fashioned him. His organs, his eyes, his brain, his external flesh.
A beautiful giant statue.
But a statue only until I give him life. And now the time has come. That is why I sent for you, old teacher. You who pointed out the path.
Oh, I know nothing of all this.
Oh, yes. You sent me to the ancients for forgotten knowledge. Through them I learned of magic and the hidden truths of nature.
Well, Victor, you are mad. You frighten me.
I am not mad. In a moment I shall be as God. I shall have created man.
Well, you blaspheme.
Why? To the new race of whom the sleeping giant will be father, Frankenstein shall be the name of God.
Victor, stop.
No. Look at him. He'll be 8 feet tall. A mountain of strength. His diet can be the roughest foods. The Arctic Circle of the desert can be his home. And his brain will hold the intellect to grasp in a single day the wisdom that man must take a life to learn. The treasure house of nature I have wrested her dearest secret is in this machine. I pull the lever. Watch! The moment he will live. And I have improved on nature. I have improved on God.
Why, the giant moves.
Yes.
There's pulsation in the veins.
In a moment he will rise and walk.
Great God!
No, great Frankenstein!
Victor, the beautiful contours of his body are changing.
What?
Yes, the flesh is assuming the look of death. It's shriveling like a mummy.
He's becoming ugly. Misshapen.
But you have created a horror.
A machine! Let me turn it off!
No, too late. He breathes.
He lives! God! I have made a monster.
Well, that really sends chills up and down one spine, even today. It really holds up. And as a matter of fact, Alonzo Dean Cole lived in Connecticut for a while. I don't know if you know that, Roger, but you discovered that, Ed, didn't you?
Yes, because this recording came from his collection, I guess. He had lived here, and when he left some recordings up in the attic, and I bought the recordings from the next owner of the house. So I was very fortunate. I think these are the only copies in the country that exist today.
I'm sure they are, and I expect to get a tape from you. Or I'll sue
you will. Roger, you were...
I'll think of something, don't worry.
You were actively involved in sports casting, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
Any exciting moments in sports for you on the air?
Well...
memorable moments, perhaps?
In Franklin Field, we did the regular Army-Navy game every year. Now, Ted Husing was one of the greatest, to me, one of the finest, if not the very best football announcer I ever heard in my life. He went down.
I would agree with that.
He did a great job for CBS in public relations. He went down and played with the team, suited up and on the field. So it could have been snowing, and in a fog he could have told you who was carrying the ball.
And know what it felt like,
and
too.
He knew everybody. So he arranged in that old Franklin Field where the press box was about 8 blocks long, and we were on one end, and he's in the other end, and I don't know where NBC was, so where's in the middle. He made all arrangements for these coaches, like Andy Kerr, undefeated, unscored on, and uninvited. You remember that year? No, you're too young. God, it's awful to be with kids. And all these great football coaches. So they all came up the stairs by me. He said, "I'm for the radio. Sit down." I had all his guests on my between in the halftime.
That's beautiful. Roger, let's talk about another program that you produced and directed and inspired. It Pays to be Ignorant.
This to me, was a very funny show. Well, what happened was that his daughter, Tom Howard's daughter, Howard and Shelton, was married and working in WELI, I think, I'm not sure about this, in New Haven, and they dreamed of this idea of It Pays to be Ignorant, the silly questions, who's buried in Grant's tomb and all that sort of stuff. So they brought it down to Tom, and Tom brought it to me. And I thought it was pretty good, so we started to cast it. Of course, Shelton was going to be in right away. He's a funny guy. And then we got Harry McNaughton, and I engaged a girl, a very funny little gal, and she got a chance to do a bigger thing, so she went. And Tom came out of the past and said, "What about Lulu McConnell?" So we got Lulu on, and that's when luck was with us. We could have had the other girls. He probably would have been good, but never like Lulu.
No.
And we went on, did an audition, and we left the script. The script ran about 20 minutes or a little under, and the rest of it was for laughs and ad-libs because they could all throw in things pretty well.
This was a scripted program.
Yes,
basically.
yes. That was the sort of guidelines.
Yeah.
That's the expression they use today. We sold it the first night to Peel's Beer. Mm-hmm. A fellow named Davidson was the account executive, and Sherman K. Ellis was the agency. We sent the first script over to him, and he called me up and said, "Roger, I'm a grandfather, and this joke wasn't funny when I was a boy. The joke was, I can row a boat canoe," which isn't very funny in itself. But he hadn't understood the characterizations of these people. He hadn't really heard George Shelton. That was George Shelton's big thing, taking anything and making a big laugh out of it. So I finally said, "Sherman, if this doesn't get a minute and a half laugh tonight, then I'll send the script, so you doctor him. I won't touch him." So that night, of course, in his own delectable and delicious way, George gave the line with that shy little, I have a great one for you, and it got about a minute and a half laugh, and God bless McNaughton. As the laugh started to die, which is when you always come in on a laugh, you never let me pause there. He came in, he said, "Gee, I wish I could think of things like that. That was wonderful. I never think of those things." Another big laugh. And that was the end of it. Sherman said, "Forget it, Rog. I sent him over for the files, please." And it went on and on like that. We had one of the first, not the first, to use the commercials. We had Peels, and for the first 3 weeks, Tom said, "I know there was a reason they bought this thing. They want to talk about their beer." It was very funny.
Can we hear an excerpt from It Pays to Be Ignorant?
Yeah, this is a pretty rare show. In fact, even Roger didn't have any in his collection, I believe, of your tapes, but we do have one.
Yes, I do.
Well, I spoke too soon. But I do have one, and again, we'll hear all the characters, Harry McNaughton and the others that were mentioned.
What is a revolver? A sure cure for common colds. Correct. Pay that man $8. What is a wife? The bitter half. The bitter half. Correct. Pay that man $9 because...
It pays to be ignorant. Here's another half hour with radio's biggest collection of zanies, the incomparable wits, George Shelton, Lulu McConnell, and Harry McNaughton, our doctor of music, Nat Novick, and the man who sticks his neck out every week at this time, our moderator, Tom Howard.
Thank you. Thank you, Johnny. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Well, once again, we're here with that quiz program that has become an institution because that's where it belongs. We have a board of experts who are so dumb they think a steam fitter is a man who fits steam together. First, we have the celebrated author, Mr. Harry McNaughton, who has just written a book entitled Inside the Aquarium, or A Fish Gets in My Eyes. But here he is, Mr. Harry McNaughton.
Thank you. I have a poem, Mr. Howard.
I know.
Yes, I kissed her in the garden. 'Twas a moonlight night. She was a marble statue, and I was a little bit tight.
I imagine.
You know, her heart was made of stone.
All right.
So I took her for granted.
You took her for granted, huh? Hey. Next, we have a woman who speaks for herself and anyone else who happens to be around. A woman with such large bags under her eyes, you think she's peeking at you out of a kangaroo's pouch. Here she is, whispering Lulu McConnell.
You know, Mr. Howard, I went to my doctor over a month ago, and he put me on a diet. But I don't seem to lose an ounce.
Well, did you stick to the diet? Did you eat just what the doctor told you?
Yes, I did.
You didn't eat anything else?
Nothing.
Good.
Except, of course, my regular meal.
Oh, well, excuse that. All right. Next, we have a man who really should be hung, but he can't, because he hasn't any head. A man who eats oil margarine, but although he has seen butter days, here he is, George Shelton.
So, you know, Mr. Howard, I was alone last weekend, so I took a trip down to Coney Island, all by myself. And you know, the funniest thing happened.
Uh-huh. What happened?
I took a ride through the Tunnel of Love, and when I come out, I was engaged to a top sergeant.
I couldn't believe it. All right, now that you met the experts, folks, we'll get right along with tonight's questions. Here's the first question this evening. In the poem, The Village Blacksmith, can you tell me the vocation of the man the poem is about?
Mr. Mr. Howard, who wrote the poem?
All right, never mind. We'll just skip that.
Skip it. Oh, shall we go on to the next?
The next one.
Next question.
Well, wait a minute. We haven't tried to answer the first question yet.
I thought you said we ought to skip it.
I didn't say we should skip the question. I said we just skip the writer of the poem.
Why? Why, Mr. Howard?
Because that is not the question.
All right, then what is the question? What do you keep this in suspenders for?
Suspenders. Very cute. In the poem, The Village Blacksmith, what is the vocation of the man mentioned in the poem?
What is your vocation, Mr. Shelton?
Oh, my vocation? Oh, the last 2 weeks in August.
No. That's nice. That's vacation, you nitwit. Vacation.
My old man and I spent our vacation in Atlantic City. The clerk at the hotel said to me, "Do you want twin beds?" I said, "Don't be silly. Me and my old man ain't twins."
No. There couldn't be two of you.
No.
You know, I went up to the mountains for my vacation, but I had a terrible time getting a room. The clerk at the hotel said the only room he could give me was with an Indian.
Are you sure he said Indian?
Well, he said the only thing he had was a single room with running water.
Running water, right. Very nice.
He was the father of Rain in the Face.
All right. Listen, you three drips. The question's not about vacation. It's about the poem. The Village Blacksmith.
Oh, I know that poem, Mr. Howard. It goes, "It was a balmy summer evening and a goodly crowd was there. That well-nigh filled Joe's bar room at the corner of the square."
That's the face on the barroom floor.
Oh, no, Mr. Howard. No, the face on the barroom floor goes like this. Under the spreading chestnut trees.
Oh, Mr. McDonald. Look. That's the Village Blacksmith. Now, what was his occupation or his vocation? What was he doing under the chestnut tree?
Picking chestnuts.
He was picking chestnuts. Mr. Sheldon, if you take real good care of yourself and get plenty of sleep and eat the proper food, you have excellent chances of becoming an idiot.
No.
Yes.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Howard. I'll do my best.
Yes, start tomorrow, will you?
I'll start tonight.
Can we please get back to the questions about a famous poem?
How'd the poem go again, Mr. McNaughton?
Under the spreading chestnut tree, the village smithy stands, and stands, and stands. No seats.
No seats.
You know the man's got fallen arches?
Please.
What was his name?
Mr. McNaughton told you his name. Smitty.
Yeah.
Oh, I know a man whose name was Smitty.
Yeah? Was he standing under a chestnut tree?
No, he was laying under a walnut table.
Ain't that?
I still like my poem best. It was a balmy summer evening.
Mr. Sheldon, please, will you cut it out?
I like that poem, too. It reminds me of my old man.
Oh, really? Does your old man recite the face on the barroom floor?
No, but I've seen him laying on it lots of times.
Don't you know anybody that stands up on their feet?
Give me that piece of chalk with which you mark the baseball score.
Look, Mr. Sheldon, I would like to give you a rope. Will you shut up?
Go right ahead, Mr. Sheldon. It's beautiful. Another drink with chalk in hand, the vagabond began.
Yeah.
And he drew the face that well might buy the soul of any man. Shakespeare. I love it.
Shakespeare, yes. You love it. Will you kindly cut
I like Shakespeare, too.
You like Shakespeare. He probably liked you a lot, too.
You're listening to the Golden Age of Radio with Dick Bertel and the recordings of Ed Cochran. Brought to you by Burritt Mutual Savings Bank, serving Central Connecticut since 1889, and by WTIC. This message about saving money is brought to you by the Big B, Burritt Mutual Savings Bank, the money place. You've probably been hearing a lot about new higher interest rates on savings accounts. Maybe you've seen ads proclaiming highest rates allowed or highest rates available, or some other similar statement that leads you to believe that some banks pay you more than others. Well, some do. Savings banks can pay you more than commercial banks, for example. Federal regulations allow it. And some savings institutions pay you more than others, as a matter of policy. But let's get the facts straight. That's the policy at Burritt Mutual. The Big B can and does pay you the highest allowable rates on all accounts that are governed by federal interest rate limits, effective August 1st. You can end the confusion. Simply inquire at any of the 6 offices of the Big B, Burritt Mutual Savings, in New Britain, West Hartford, Glastonbury, Wethersfield, and Rocky Hill, and now in Newington. Burritt Mutual Savings, the money place. Member FDIC. Once again, Dick Bertel.
Our guest tonight, Roger Bauer, as we reminisce about the golden age of radio and I want to just deviate here for a moment to the field of television because you made your first television appearance back in 1933. Where?
In, you should pardon the expression, Macy's window. They had this program on, and they were going to try it out, and Macy's was always a very progressive outfit, I always felt. So they put it in there, and I built a style show, and I told a few jokes. One of was pretty terrible. You can television anything. You can television, but you can't tell her much. That was a pretty bad one. But we had a lot of other things going on in there, and
was this closed circuit?
Yes.
People in the store
you could get
watch
it maybe
you.
another block away,
Yeah.
possibly.
Yeah.
Because it was not. It was very much in its infancy then, as you can well imagine.
Right. Let's talk about some of the mystery and detective shows that you directed and announced. I guess you did a myriad number of those. They were on Mutual. So many of them.
I can tell you that I can't remember many of them. Much I can't remember the names of them anymore. We took writers of good novels. I generally hired a fellow named Howard Merrill, who's out on the coast now. He was very good at that. And I didn't do anything such as High Brown did, which is Bulldog Drummond and some of these others, but we had to. The problem there was these programs were on the other networks, mostly, and we had to compete with them. And I'm happy to say we generally were first in our time slot and pretty high in the ratings.
Well, one of the shows that comes to mind is in your collection, Ed.
Yes, this is another rare show. It's called The Crime Club, and it introduces the action by a librarian going to his bookshelf and pulling off a volume, and then the actual play is then dramatized. And in this excerpt, we have a guest who was on just a very few months ago, Raymond Edward Johnson.
Raymond Edward Johnson. He was a sweetheart of a guy.
He still is. Just down to see him the other day, and he sends his regards, by the way. And I told him I was going to try and work this into our interview because your name is mentioned at the end as producer, so I thought we'd listen to the excerpt and then hear the credits with your name mentioned.
You tell him to hop up the game when he gets to my name, will you? Because some people listen too fast.
Hello, I hope I haven't kept you waiting. Yes, this is the Crime Club. I'm the librarian. The Sun is a witness. Yes, we have that Crime Club story for you. Come right over. Here. Good. Take the easy chair by the window. Comfortable? The book is on this shelf. Here it is. The Sun is a Witness by Aaron Mark Stein. A very unusual story of a design for killing that couldn't succeed without murder. Let's look at it under the reading lamp. It was Tim Mulligan's job as an archaeologist to find out about dead civilizations. And he was finding out about the Anasazi, the Indian cliff dwellers who inhabited the Great Canyon walls of the Southwest many centuries ago. It was late morning, June 22nd, the second day of summer, and Tim Mulligan was digging carefully in one of the caves high above the canyon floor when George Dillon, the owner of the property and Tim's benefactor, climbed slowly up from the camp cave 30 feet below. He stopped to catch his breath.
George, what are you doing up here?
I wanted to see how you're getting along, Jim.
You shouldn't have done it. You're hard. Where's Tony Blake?
Well, he's around somewhere. You're not going to snitch on me, are you, boy?
Well, you're his responsibility, Pop. He's your doctor.
Yes, but he didn't join the outfit so he can take care of me.
What do you mean?
He wants me to take care of him.
Oh, that.
Yeah. And maybe I will, after he and my niece Marion get married. But right now, it's Indian history that's got all my attention.
Oh, yeah. Well, I dug up a grave, George.
Anasazi?
I think so. I haven't unwrapped the mummy yet.
Good. We can do that together. Come on, let's go. What's that?
The wind.
No, Tim. No wind ever made a sound like that. Sounds human. It is human. And it's coming from...
George, take it easy.
There's a cave.
There's no one in there.
The open grave. The Anasazi mummy. Tim.
This has got to be a trick.
Tim.
George.
My heart.
Where's the digitalis?
It's all right. I just lost my breath. I'll be all right.
Are you sure?
Yes. Help me down to the camp cave.
You bet. Let me call for Tony first. I feel a lot better with him around. Tony Blake. I guess he's out of range. Let's go. How is he, Tony?
He just fell asleep. Let's get away from this cave opening. I don't want him disturbed.
Okay.
Now, what about that ghost, Tim?
Somebody's trying to kill your patient, Doctor.
Hmm?
Do you think he can be scared to death?
With his heart, anything can happen.
That's what I mean. Where's Marion?
Are you kidding?
Not this trip. You, Marion, and I are the only ones here with George. The others...
Well, that's where she went, to the others at the ranch house.
When?
This morning, while you were digging for your ghost. She was worried about her brother.
Oh, of course. It's been 4 days since Fraser went back to the house with Matt Casey to get provisions. I didn't realize...
Now, look, Tim, I got to talk to you about something.
Yeah?
Give up this crazy project.
Give it up?
It's not doing George any good. His heart can't take it.
I'm not his doctor, Tony.
And I am. So, what, he won't listen to me. As long as you're on the job, he wants to be with you. Don't you understand?
Yes, I think I do.
He's a defibrillator heart in a very bad shape, and the slightest stimulation...
You're not worried about that, Tony, are you?
What?
You've got an axe of your own to grind, and it's beginning to look like a battle axe.
Don't get dirty, Mulligan.
I'll try not to. You can't cut me out, so you're trying to move me out. Anything to get George's mind off Indians and onto your sanitarium project.
It's a darn sight more useful than digging for dried-up bones.
That depends on how much of a scientist you are.
I told you not to get dirty, Mulligan.
Stop waving those fists. You're liable to hit yourself in the face.
Tim. Tony.
George.
Come in here, both of you.
I thought you were sleeping.
I heard every word you two said out there. When do you think I'm going to die, Tony?
If you continue to stay here, George...
I'm going to stay here until Timothy finishes what he's doing.
And there's no telling. There's nothing I can do about it.
Are you quitting?
No, I'll be around if you need me.
You shouldn't have been so rough with him, Pop.
Tim.
You know what, George?
Tim, do you really think somebody's trying to scare me to death?
It's possible.
That fellow?
I don't know. I'd rather not believe your own doctor's out to kill you.
He's the only one here with us, Tim. And if that sound we heard was not a ghost, but a rattlesnake.
Where?
In here someplace.
Now stay where you are, George, and don't get excited. I'll look for it.
Wait.
Try not to get excited, George, and don't get off that cot.
You'll never find it, Tim.
It's in this cave, I will.
It isn't.
What?
It's in this wall next to me. Solid rock. And we can hear the rattle.
Now, wait a minute, George.
I don't want to believe in ghosts, but nobody can make that sound come out of solid rock.
Oh, wait. All right, Pop, it's gone. We can relax. Yeah, Tony's right. This is a bad place for you.
I'm not afraid, Timothy.
But I am. I'd like to get you back to the ranch house where you might get an even break.
I'm not running away.
Good for you. I'm taking you away. Now, sit tight. I'll get Tony, and we'll load the stuff into the car.
Tim, does that mean you're giving up your work here?
No, indeed. It means I'm going into another business. Ghost hunting.
The Sun is a Witness, based on a story by Aaron Mark Stein. Stedman Coles did the radio adaptation. Roger Bauer produced and directed. Raymond Edward Johnson played Tim Mulligan, and Sidney Smith was Tony Blake. Oh, I beg your pardon. Hello. I hope I haven't kept you waiting. Yes, this is the Crime Club.
All right, now we've covered most of the gamut of shows, at least representative of the things that you've done over the years, Roger, but we've got to build up to that show that everybody remembers. And you said that this is kind of an albatross in a way. I mean, people seem to remember this and nothing else about you. Can you top this?
Well, that's true. I went on the show under pressure from Mr. McCosker, who was then managing president and chairman of the board of WOR, because we couldn't find somebody to be the moderator. And unfortunately, or fortunately, maybe, but anyhow, I have produced and directed operas. I've handled Eugene Ormandy, Alfred Wallenstein. In the pop field, Morton Gould, the Dorsey brothers, Benny Goodman. In the dramatic field, I start with Margaret Anglin, who was a star and a favorite of the theater before the 1900s. I didn't know her then, and shut up. And I go through all these things, Helen Hayes, Maxwell Anderson scripts, and anything anybody remembers. Oh, you were on Can You Top This? And if it isn't that, then it's a page of ignorance, because I remember the name there, or then it's 20 questions. But it was a great show. I must admit that I did it kind of with the right hand. I thought it was going to be funny, and I thought it was going to be good. But Can You Top This one on and on and on? We finally put it to bed about 1953, I think.
Who were the original panelists?
The original panelists were Senator Edward Hastings Ford, Joe Laurie Jr., and Harry Hirschfield. And I engaged a young man who was about 19 years old. I'd known since he was in knee pants, called Peter Donald. He was a great dialectician, a very good storyteller, and he would take a story, we'll say, from one of you birds that came in, and he'd build it up, put a lot of laughs in it, and made it a real contest.
All right, now, here were three panelists faced with a joke that was sent in by Ed Corcoran or Dick Bertel or someone, and we can assume that they hadn't heard the joke prior to going on the air.
They didn't even know the subject.
How did they manage to tie in these jokes with the subject matter?
Well, number one, they knew all the jokes of the world to begin with. We used to sit around the club and we'd start one and they'd give you 4 different finishes. But the point is that people say they can't think of a joke in a minute. They must know the subject. Well, they forgot that Peter Donald, I would say the subject is doctors. All right, Pete, read Mr. Corcoran's story. Well, Pete would take about a minute and a half to do that. There'd be a laugh, then... Now, maybe one had put his hand up. He'd tell a story. Then the second guy now had 2.5 to 3 minutes. And the third guy had about 4 minutes to think. If you're in that business and can't think of a story, and if they didn't have one, so they pull out one of their old great ones. I said, what the devil has that got to do with doctors? They got 1,000, because the object was to tell jokes, not to try to tell subjects.
All right, let's listen to Can You Top This? Ed, can you date it for us?
Well, actually, Roger can, because he's donated this particular excerpt. I have a few, but this is one he's particularly fond of. So when was it, Roger? Do you remember the year?
Well, I think it's early 1942.
Can you top this? Why did the chicken cross the road? That was no chicken. That was my wife. Can you top that, Harry Hirschfield?
Aye.
Can you, Senator Ford?
I might.
And you, Joe Laurie Jr.?
Maybe.
Those expedient exclamations introduce the pint-sized author comedian, Joe Laurie Jr., the popular after-dinner speaker and current topic humorist, Senator Ford, and the well-known columnist, cartoonist, and after-dinner speaker, Harry Hirschfield. These effervescent emus of entertainment bring you another session of Can You Top This, with the best wishes of Kirkman Soap Flakes. And here's that enchanting exponent of elegant English, Roger Bauer.
Good evening. By this time, I'm sure you all know that the top rule of Can You Top This is keep 'em laughing. Can You Top This is unrehearsed and spontaneous. Anybody can send in a joke. If your joke is read in this program by the well-known actor and storyteller, Peter Donald, you are credited with $11. Then each of our 3 gag specialists, Harry Hirschfield, Joe Laurie Jr., and Senator Ford, who have not heard your joke until Peter Donald tells it, gets a chance to top it with another joke on the same subject. Every time your joke is topped, your credit is topped by $2. If all 3 jokesters top you, Kirkman sends you $5 and a joke book. And everyone whose joke is told by Peter Donald gets a big gift package of 6 Kirkman soap products. Laughs are registered on the Kirkman laugh meter in full view of the studio audience, and in all cases, the decision of our judges is final. All right, gentlemen, are you ready? Ready.
That's fine. The first subject, the theater.
What's happened to it?
This comes from Mrs. Irene Dobrey of Newark, New Jersey. And as I said, the subject is the theater. Peter Donald, will you read Mrs. Dobrey's story, please?
Well, it seems that Jake Ginsburg
had never been to the theater in all his life. He's just an easygoing guy, didn't like to go out much, so one night, he was sitting around the house, and his wife was looking at him, and finally she says, "Hey, Jake," she said, "hey." She says, "You know, I'm ashamed of you." She says, "Honest to goodness," she says, "you sit around here every night like a big meatball." She says, "I'm tired of looking at you." She says, for goodness sakes, don't be a no-good all your life. Why don't you go out to the theater at night and get a little culture, see the acting and everything?" He says, "All right, don't holler, so I'll go to the theater." So he goes down to a theater to see a musical comedy, and of course he gets inside, and he thought it was wonderful. Oh, he walked around the lobby, and he looked at all the chandeliers and the beautiful plush seats. So he sits down there. In a couple of minutes, the orchestra comes out, and they play the overture to the show. And he applauds at the end of the overture. And as soon as they finish playing the overture and the play starts, he gets up and he goes home. So he gets home, and his wife, she says, "Hey," she says, "what's the matter, Papa? You're home so early. What's the matter? You didn't like the performance, the show? You didn't have a good time?" He said, "Oh, I had a wonderful time. Oh," he says, "did I enjoy?" He says, "Everything was wonderful. Everything was a number one ipsy-pipsies. Wonderful." He says, "Listen," he says, the theater was beautiful, and the lights were wonderful, and the music was gorgeous. And he says, then all of a sudden, the curtain went up, and people came out, and they started talking, and it was none of my business, so I got up and went home."
Well, that went to the top of the Kirkman laugh meter. The top is 130, gentlemen. We go for the ride? 130, not necessarily for the ride. If all three of you gentlemen can get 130, Kirk will be glad to send you some products.
That's worthwhile.
Yeah, so you can really try out. Harry Hirschfield put his hand up first.
I like this dialogue. Two women are talking, and one says, "My son is the biggest scenario writer in Hollywood. Such a scenario, he's the biggest." And she says, "And your son?" Says, "My son is a commentator in front of a burlesque theater." That's the ride. No soap.
Well,
another gag.
That was 30 if you want to...
No, let's pass it on.
You can tell another one if you wish, Harry. I have a minute here. Well, that was 30. It didn't top
I should kill
Mrs.
myself for
Dobre's
these prices.
It didn't top Mrs. Dobre's 130, so she still holds her own naturally, $11. Joe Laurie had his hand up second.
I always liked the one about the old fella in the moving picture house, and he's down front, and he's looking around, he's making people get up, and they're looking around, and he lights matches, and finally the usher comes down, he says, "What's the idea? What's the matter? What'd you do? Lose something?" He says, "Yes, I lost a Carmel." He says, "Out of my mouth fell a Carmel." He says, well, all this fuss for a Carmel?" He says, "Yes, but my teeth were in it."
Well, Joe,
good gag.
Joe, you also hit the top of the Kirkman laugh meter. You tied Mrs. Dobre's 130. She still holds her own, though, with $11. Senator Ford, you're scratching your cranium there. Are you picking up another 130 story for us?
Well, no, I was at a theatrical party the other night, and I told one that I think fits in here all right. The first show I ever saw was a railroad melodrama called The Brakeman's Daughter or Fun in a Signal Tower. Well, although I was a mere stripling at the time, I still retain all the scenes very vividly, especially the last act. That was a Lulu. It was a dark night. There was a terrible storm. The lightning flashed. The thunder roared. And the fast express was approaching a railroad bridge when the darn broke. You have to say darn. You can't say the other word on the radio, you see. Well, the darn broke. The water cascaded down in torrents and washed away the railroad bridge. There was the fast express approaching, roaring toward the railroad bridge that was washed out with its human cargo of 90 souls and as many heels. And there was the railroad bridge washed away, the signal tower gone, no lanterns, in fact, nothing with which to signal the train, when out of the darkness dashed the brakeman's daughter. She rushed down to the track and waved the clothespin. The train approached. The engineer saw the clothespin in the beam of his headlight and stopped the train. Thus, the fast thinking of the brakeman's daughter averted a catastrophe. For every engineer knows that a clothespin is a sign of washout on the line.
Well, Senator, I got mine. I just thought of it. Just thought of it. That, Senator, almost blew the top off the Kirkman laugh meter. Since none of you wits has topped Mrs. Dobray's, we send her $11 in that big Kirkman gift package.
Here's a message of importance to everyone who's interested in saving money from the Big B, Burritt Mutual Savings Bank, the money place. Right now, for a limited time, Burritt Mutual can offer the highest rates on savings accounts, up to 8.03% effective annual yield on a 7 5/8% 5-year certificate. Interest remains on deposit to earn the top yield, and there's a $10,000 minimum required. At maturity, that $10,000 will have grown to $14,718.46. That's the top savings account. It's the highest rate, and it's at Burritt Mutual, the Big B, in New Britain, West Hartford, Wethersfield and Rocky Hill, Glastonbury, and now in Newington. 8.03% effective yield on 5-year savings certificates at Burritt Mutual Savings, the money place. Member FDIC.
Well, I find those stories just as funny today as they ever were, and I suppose that's the secret of good humor, the fact that it does stand up. Roger, we've run out of time, and I'm sure we haven't run out of stories, I can tell that. We do have to say goodnight. I want to thank you so much for being with us here on the Golden Age of Radio.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me and also for buying me that delicious lunch. I love those Eggs Benedict. And I love the olives. What kind of sauce is that they put in the olives over there? That's delicious.
I don't know, but let's have some more of that sauce. Until next time, this is Dick Bertel.
This is Ed Corcoran.
Good night.
The Golden Age of Radio with Dick Bertel and the recordings of Ed Corcoran has been brought to you by WTIC and by Burritt Mutual Savings Bank, serving Central Connecticut since 1889. Be sure to hear the next Golden Age of Radio broadcast Wednesday, September 26th, when our guest will be one of the chief denizens of Fred Allen's Allen's Alley, Senator Claghorn, alias Kenny Delmar. That's actor-comedian Kenny Delmar, Wednesday, September 26th at 9:05. With the engineering and technical assistance of Bob Shirago and Dick French, the Golden Age of Radio is produced and edited by Brian Hartnett. This is Bill Henry.
4 ounces, that's a lot. Twice as much for a nickel, too. Pepsi-Cola is the drink.
Pillsbury Snow Sheen Cake Flour brings you Grand Central Station.
Good evening, friends of the inner sanctum. This is your host to welcome you in through the squeaking door to another half hour